What is Thanksgiving? Is it a harmonious feast shared between Pilgrims and Native Americans, as often portrayed in our collective memory? Or does it mark the beginning of a darker saga, what some would call the onset of a genocide? This holiday, wrapped in myth and celebration, carries a history as complex as it is contested. Today, we peel back the layers of Thanksgiving, tracing its origins from the 17th century to its evolution into a national holiday. Prepare to uncover raw, unvarnished truths as we explore a history that challenges the familiar narrative, revealing the profound heritage behind a day that is both revered and mourned. The Pilgrims were part of a radical sect that sought to separate from the Church of England. They opposed the Church's elaborate ceremonies and hierarchical structure, which they believed strayed from biblical teachings. They envisioned an autonomous church, where the congregation followed a simpler form of worship based directly on Scripture. Their radical beliefs were not just a religious stance, but a political challenge to the intertwined authority of church and state, leading to persecution and eventual flight from England. Across the ocean, native peoples had lived for millennia with a deep connection to the land. They, along with other tribes, had complex societies with established trade networks, diplomatic alliances, and at times fierce conflicts. Many nations in the region, including those of the Wampanoag Confederacy, had been trading with Europeans for decades. But the arrival of the Pilgrims marked a turning point. Tisquantum, better known as Squanto, who had been enslaved and taken to Europe before returning home, played a crucial role in mediating between the two groups. In this era of exploration and conquest, interactions between Europeans and Native Americans ranged from mutually beneficial trade to violent conflict. Both sides were complex, with their own values and practices that could seem foreign and at times cruel to the other. Native American tribes had their own forms of warfare and justice, which could include acts seen as brutal by European standards. Captives might be subjected to ritual torture, serving as social catharsis and a means of reinforcing tribal solidarity in the face of loss. Yet it is crucial to understand these practices within their cultural context, marked by a deep spiritual connection to the land and a rich tradition of storytelling and oral history. As we delve into the past, it's essential to remember that history is seldom black and white. The moral judgments of today cannot be neatly applied to a time of survival and conquest, where concepts of good and evil were as fluid as the changing tides. The story of Thanksgiving is a tapestry of human experience, woven with courage, desperation, alliance, and conflict. The Pilgrims, part of a radical Puritan faction, sought not just to purify the Church of England, but to separate from it entirely. Their quest for a pure form of worship, free from what they saw as the corrupting influence of the established church, was a direct challenge to the religious uniformity imposed by King James. Their dissent was not merely theological. It was also a political act of defiance against the merging of church and state power. In Leiden, in the Netherlands, the Pilgrims found the religious autonomy they craved, but their time there was marked by economic hardship and cultural isolation. Dutch society was more liberal and commercially focused than they were accustomed to, and the Pilgrims feared the erosion of their religious values and English identity. This concern, combined with a desire to evangelize in a new land, propelled their decision to embark on the perilous journey to America. The agreement known as the Mayflower Contract with merchant adventurers was a pragmatic step, but it also reflected the Pilgrims' commitment to community and mutual responsibility. The arrangement stipulated not only financial terms but also the collective welfare and governance of the colony, setting a precedent for a community-oriented approach to colonization. The 66-day journey of the Mayflower is emblematic of the Pilgrims' resilience. The ship, designed primarily for cargo and short-distance passenger transport, was ill-suited for the transatlantic voyage, and conditions on board were dire. Yet the Pilgrims' steadfast faith and communal bonds sustained them through the trials of the Atlantic crossing. William Bradford later wrote in his journal, "Being thus arrived in a good harbor and brought safe to land, they fell upon their knees and blessed the God of heaven, who had brought them over the vast and furious ocean." Drafted in response to dissent among the passengers, the Mayflower Compact was a seminal document in the history of democratic governance. It established a framework for self-government and collective decision-making, principles that would echo through American history. Its assertion that government derived its powers from the consent of the governed was a radical idea, influencing future democratic charters, including the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. The selection of Plymouth as the settlement site was a critical decision. Cleared fields and running streams presented an inviting landscape for the weary travelers. The absence of the Patuxet people, victims of an epidemic brought by earlier Europeans, was a tragic stroke of fortune for the Pilgrims. It provided them with cleared land to settle, which they interpreted as divine providence. Importantly, the Pilgrims did not arrive with the intention of causing harm or conflict with Native Americans. They were largely unaware of the complex societies they were about to encounter and did not foresee the consequences their settlement would have. Their first winter, however, was a brutal test of survival. Nearly half the colonists perished, yet those who survived laid the foundations for a community that would endure, embodying ideals of self-reliance, faith, and self-governance. Bradford recorded the devastation. That which was most sad and lamentable was that in 2 or 3 months' time, half of their company died, especially in January and February, being the depth of winter and wanting houses and other comforts, being infected with the scurvy and other diseases which this long voyage and their incommodate condition had brought upon them. The interactions between Native Americans and the Pilgrims were complex and multifaceted. Some Native Americans, like Squanto and the Wampanoag tribe, chose to assist the Pilgrims, teaching them vital survival skills. Others viewed the newcomers with suspicion and hostility. These differing responses were shaped by previous encounters with European explorers, traders, and slavers, which were sometimes exploitative or violent. The diversity of responses to the Pilgrims must be understood against a backdrop of intertribal dynamics and the growing impact of European colonization. Some tribes saw alliances with Europeans as a strategic advantage against rival groups, while others recognized the threat of land loss and cultural erosion these new settlers represented. Samoset, an Abenaki Sagamore, was the first Native American to make direct contact with the Pilgrims at Plymouth. He startled the colonists on March 16, 1621, when he walked into the settlement and greeted them in English, learned from English fishermen who worked off Monhegan Island. Edward Winslow recounts this first encounter. An Indian came boldly amongst us, speaking English. He very boldly came all alone and along the houses straight to the rendezvous, where we intercepted him, not suffering him to go in, as undoubtedly he would out of his boldness. Massasoit was the sachem, leader, of the Wampanoag Confederacy, a group of Native American tribes in what is now southeastern Massachusetts and Rhode Island during the early 17th century. His title signified Great Leader. A record from the Pilgrims describes their engagement with him. We began to trade with him and found him a very lusty man. Thereafter, he sent us word of the plots of the Narragansett, a rival tribe, which we did believe was true. As the chill of December 1620 set in, the Pilgrims found themselves in a world far removed from anything they had known. The Mayflower remained anchored within sight, a stark reminder of both their old life and their isolation. With no time to waste, the men began constructing their first structures. The common house, a simple yet vital building, rose from the ground serving as a place of worship, communal meetings, and shelter against harsh elements. The first winter was merciless. The settlers battled cold, disease, and scarcity of food. General sickness took a grim toll, claiming the lives of nearly half the Pilgrims, including their first governor, John Carver. Yet amidst sorrow and loss, their resolve did not waver. They clung to their faith and to each other, their determination fueled by the Mayflower Compact's promise of a new society based on collective agreement and self-government. One pilgrim recorded, "We buried our dead on the hill, marking no graves, lest the Indians perceive our numbers diminished. Yet we remain steadfast, our covenant with God and one another our solace in this wilderness." Their endurance through that first winter laid the groundwork for their community. It was a testament to human resilience and the power of a shared vision for the future. The first year of the Plymouth settlement was a relentless battle for survival. The Pilgrims faced a brutal New England winter and internal strife as they struggled to establish a communal way of life. Their initial system of labor and provision, where all worked for the common good and shared equally in the harvest, led to tension and discontent. Some felt the burden was not equally carried, and as the winter claimed more lives, strain on the community grew. Seeds brought from England failed in the stony New England soil. The Pilgrims watched in despair as crops withered, their hopes for a bountiful harvest fading. The Mayflower, their link to the Old World, remained anchored offshore, a constant reminder of the home they had left and of the fact that there was no easy turning back. A pilgrim wrote, "Our provisions being spent, and we looking daily when our ship should go for England, we began to gather our small harvest, having no more but a little corn, which we set with our own hands, and it prospered very well." The death of John Carver added to the colony's challenges. William Bradford, stepping into the role of governor, faced the daunting task of guiding a community in mourning and on the brink of collapse. It was in this crucible of hardship that the Pilgrim story would intertwine with that of the Native Americans, a meeting that proved pivotal to the survival of the settlement. The region where the Pilgrims settled was not a monolithic territory under a single authority, but a mosaic of various tribes, each with its own culture, leadership, and alliances. The Wampanoag Confederacy, under Chief Massasoit, was a dominant force in the region. The Confederacy was a loose alliance of several tribes, including the Patuxet, whose lands the Pilgrims now occupied. The Wampanoag were known for their sophisticated political structures and active trade networks. The Patuxet Band had been decimated by disease brought by earlier European explorers. Their numbers were so reduced that they ceased to exist as a distinct group by the time the Pilgrims arrived, leaving their land effectively unoccupied. To the north and east, the Abenaki, fiercely independent, maintained their own alliances and territory. To the west, the Narragansett had not been as severely affected by epidemics. Their relative strength posed a significant threat to the Wampanoag, which partly motivated Massasoit's alliance with the Pilgrims. In this intricate landscape of tribal politics, alliances were crucial. The Wampanoag decision to ally with the Pilgrims was a calculated move to bolster their position against rivals. Squanto, with his unique position as a Patuxet man and his connections to the Wampanoag, became the linchpin of this strategic alliance. Squanto's introduction to the Pilgrims was bold and unexpected. Having been abducted, sold into slavery, taken to Europe, then returning to his homeland, he understood both native and European worlds. He walked into the Plymouth settlement, greeted the stunned Pilgrims in English, and offered his assistance. His guidance in planting, fishing, and navigating the local political landscape was a turning point. He taught the Pilgrims how to plant corn with fish as fertilizer, where to fish, and how to survive in the unfamiliar environment. He also helped them understand the power dynamics among neighboring tribes and the military value the colonists' firearms represented. The land the Pilgrims inhabited was not an untouched wilderness, but a political chessboard. The Pilgrims, with their muskets and cannons, became a new factor in that board. The Wampanoag, recognizing the potential of these weapons, saw an opportunity in forging an alliance. The trade and mutual protection agreement between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag was about more than resources. It was about security. The Pilgrims' firearms, a technology the native peoples had not mastered, became a cornerstone of the mutual defense pact. For the Wampanoag, the alliance meant a deterrent against their rivals. For the Pilgrims, it promised a safeguard against potential hostilities. Following these initial meetings, Pilgrims and Wampanoag embarked on a path of mutual benefit and cooperation. The exchange of knowledge and resources sparked a period of growth and relative stability that transformed both communities. The Pilgrims, once teetering on the brink of failure, now thrived with the agricultural knowledge imparted by the Wampanoag. Fields expanded, and Plymouth's storerooms began to fill. Cultural exchanges went beyond trade and agriculture. Social interactions, though cautious, began to weave a tapestry of shared experiences. The Pilgrims learned from the Wampanoag's deep understanding of the land, while the Wampanoag gained access to European tools and goods that brought novelty and utility into their lives. The evolution of Plymouth Colony was remarkable, from a precarious foothold to a growing community. The construction of a fortified palisade and the establishment of a militia underscored an increasing sense of permanence and security. The mutual protection pact with the Wampanoag, backed by the Pilgrims' firearms, was central to this security strategy, ensuring peace and stability long enough for both sides to prosper. The enduring legacy of this period is one of cooperation and adaptation. The Pilgrims' willingness to learn, combined with the strategic foresight of native leaders, transformed a fragile outpost into a thriving settlement. It is a narrative that speaks to the potential of unity and the strength found in diversity. In the ensuing years of Plymouth Colony, the Pilgrims' communal system, born of their collective covenant, was put to the test. Land and resources were shared, and the fruits of labor were distributed equally among all. Yet this idealistic system struggled under practical realities. The communal approach, though noble in intent, led to discontent and a lack of individual incentive. Without a direct link between effort and reward, productivity declined, threatening the colony's survival. Governor William Bradford, faced with low morale and dwindling resources, enacted a transformative change. He divided the land among families, giving them ownership of their labor and its results. This marked the end of the communal system and the rise of individual stewardship. The impact was immediate and profound. Motivated by personal interest, settlers tended their parcels with greater care, leading to harvests that surpassed earlier efforts. Bradford recorded, "Each man might plant corn for his own particular, and in that regard trust to themselves, and so assign to every family a parcel of land." Another entry notes, "This had very good success, for it made all hands very industrious, so as much more corn was planted than otherwise would have been. Fields became more abundant, livestock numbers increased, and the marketplace began to thrive." Settlers engaged in commerce not only within Plymouth, but also with native tribes and distant traders. In their quest for religious autonomy, the Pilgrims had also stumbled into a new economic model. Principles of self-reliance and personal responsibility, born out of necessity, became part of the colony's ethos and later American identity. As the colony stabilized and prospered, personal lives continued to unfold, weaving stories of hope and resilience. In the spring of 1621, two such stories involved Edward Winslow and Susanna White, both of whom had lost spouses during the devastating first winter. Susanna, who had crossed on the Mayflower with her husband William White, faced the trials of the New World with steadfast courage. In the midst of the colony's harshest days, she gave birth to Peregrine, the first English child born in New England. Her husband's death left her a widow, yet her strength did not waver. Edward Winslow, similarly bereaved by the loss of his wife Elizabeth, found companionship and solace with Susanna. Their marriage, solemnized with the simplicity of Pilgrim Christian traditions, stood as a beacon of hope for the entire community. Their children became living symbols of continuity and future promise, each new birth celebrated not just as a family joy, but as a communal triumph. These children, born in the New World, were the first of a new generation, embodying the hope and promise of Plymouth Colony. They were the living signs of a society emerging from wilderness, one destined to grow far beyond the colony's humble beginnings. Yet Plymouth was not without its darker moments. The first duel in the colony, fought in 1621 between Edward Doty and Edward Leicester, both servants of Stephen Hopkins, was a grim reminder that old passions and conflicts crossed the ocean with them. Their choice of swords and daggers clashed with the colony's peaceful ideals. Although the duel ended without death, the punishment was severe. Both men were bound head and feet together for 24 hours without food or drink. The harsh penalty served as both deterrent and public declaration of the colony's commitment to order and discipline. A more somber chapter is the tale of John Billington. Arriving on the Mayflower with his family and known for his unruly behavior, Billington eventually became the first person in Plymouth executed for murder, having fatally shot a fellow colonist after a dispute. His hanging marked the colony's first recorded murder and first use of capital punishment, setting a precedent for the rule of law in grave matters. Even everyday life could take strangely dark turns. In one peculiar case, the death of a rooster, a valuable animal in a fragile settlement, sparked suspicion and fear. Found dead under mysterious circumstances, the bird's demise led to whispers of witchcraft, a fear that would later haunt wider New England. Investigation showed it had likely been killed by a predator, probably a fox. The revelation quieted talk of witchcraft, but it reminded the colonists of the constant dangers surrounding them. These darker narratives highlight the complexity of life in Plymouth. The settlers struggled not only against the elements and the unknown, but also against the darker aspects of human nature. Yet even in their bleakest hours, the colony clung to law, order, and community, persevering through adversity. Amid the hardships and the monumental task of building a new society, the Pilgrims and their neighbors still found time for laughter and lightheartedness, vital to their survival. On the Mayflower, peril mixed with irony. One pompous sailor, who frequently cursed and mocked the seasick passengers, boasting he would be the one to toss their bodies into the sea, was the first to fall ill and die. He received the same watery grave he had so confidently promised others. In the settlement, attempts at animal husbandry produced their own comedy. A mischievous goat was known for breaking fences, raiding gardens, and once even leading a herd of cattle straight into the meeting house during a service, much to the horror and secret amusement of the congregation. Even town governance had its lighter side. In one early town meeting, a heated debate over the layout of the settlement ended abruptly when a platform collapsed, sending several dignified leaders tumbling into a heap. The incident broke tension and reminded everyone that a sense of humor was essential to community life. These anecdotes show that joy and humor were never entirely absent, even in the face of overwhelming challenges. Often, it was the ability to laugh and find small comforts in absurd moments that helped sustain them. In the autumn of 1621, the Pilgrims, reflecting on a year of hardship and loss, yet buoyed by a successful harvest, chose to express their relief and gratitude. The feast they prepared was a manifestation of thankfulness, a familiar European practice to rejoice over the bounty of the harvest. It was also an acknowledgement of the Wampanoag's role in their survival. Without the tribe's assistance, the harvest might not have been possible. The feast was a gesture of goodwill, a diplomatic extension of friendship, and a reinforcement of the alliance between the two groups. Preparation was communal. The Pilgrims hunted fowl, while the Wampanoag contributed 5 deer. Tables were laden with corn prepared in native styles, beans, squash, and pumpkins. Seafood, such as clams and mussels, joined the spread, along with fruits and nuts. The feast, lasting 3 days, was more than just a meal. It was a festival of games, dancing, singing, and according to some accounts, target shooting with guns and bows, activities that both entertained and showcased military skill. Pilgrims and Wampanoag shared stories, demonstrated dances, and sang songs in a powerful display of cultural exchange. Smoking tobacco, a customary practice among native peoples and adopted by some settlers, was likely common at the gathering. This shared feast was a rare moment of harmony and celebration between two very different cultures. It transcended the act of eating, encompassing gratitude, alliance, and a hope for peaceful coexistence. As the 3-day feast drew to a close, there was a palpable sense of harmony and cautious optimism. Historical accounts suggest about 50 pilgrims and around 90 Wampanoag people participated. The Wampanoag guests, who outnumbered the pilgrims nearly 2 to 1, returned to their villages with stories of the feast and the hospitality they had received. This event solidified a peaceful coexistence that would last for several years. The pilgrims, uplifted by the successful harvest and strengthened alliance, returned to their work with renewed vigor. The relationship provided security and confidence to continue building their community. In the weeks and months that followed, respect and cooperation continued to manifest. Pilgrims and Wampanoag traded knowledge and goods, ensuring mutual benefit. The aftermath of the feast was not merely a return to routine, it was a period marked by a hopeful outlook. They had shown that disparate cultures could come together in a spirit of mutual respect and gratitude. The significant number of attendees, especially the strong Wampanoag presence, underscored the importance of this new fellowship. In the beginning, the relationship between Pilgrims and Native Americans was marked by mutual benefit and relative peace. The first Thanksgiving feast was indeed a genuine celebration of collaboration and survival against the odds. Though later romanticized, it did reflect a moment of unity. Pilgrims and Wampanoag shared knowledge, resources, and moments of joy, forming the basis of a promising alliance. However, as seasons changed, so did the dynamics between them. The initial period of harmony gave way to a more complex and strained relationship as the colony expanded and the demand for land and resources grew. The narrative of a harmonious beginning was overshadowed by later conflicts and struggles. The story of the first Thanksgiving remained a cherished legend, but the following decades brought broken treaties, land disputes, and skirmishes that scarred both peoples. Recognizing the full spectrum of the Pilgrim-Native relationship is essential. It honors the initial peace while acknowledging the later discord, offering a more complete and nuanced understanding of this chapter of history. The fragile peace owed much to the diplomatic efforts of Chief Massasoit of the Wampanoag. His death marked a turning point. Massasoit had been a stabilizing force, a leader who saw value in alliance with the newcomers. His passing left a void soon filled by his son, Metacom, whom the English called King Philip. Metacom's views differed sharply from his father's. Where Massasoit had navigated coexistence with caution and foresight, Metacom faced growing English encroachment with increasing hostility. His era coincided with rapid colonial expansion and a series of misunderstandings and broken promises. Tensions escalated into what became known as King Philip's War, a devastating conflict that engulfed the region. Under Metacom's leadership, the Wampanoag and their allies launched attacks on English settlements. The war was brutal and bloody, a stark contrast to the hopeful beginnings of the Pilgrim-Wampanoag alliance. Though the English ultimately prevailed, the war resulted in the near destruction of several native tribes and left a legacy of deep mistrust. The death of Massasoit and the rise of Metacom permanently altered the trajectory of New England. Alliances shifted, and not all English communities behaved the same way. Some, like the Plymouth settlers with their history of relative peace, were reluctant warriors. Others pursued more aggressive expansion and harsher measures. King Philip's War was a regional conflict that reflected the growing pains of a rapidly changing New England. It was a war the Pilgrims, despite their early intentions of peaceful cohabitation, could not avoid. The conflict is remembered for its brutality, but it was not a war of clear-cut heroes and villains. Violence and atrocity came from all directions. Some native tribes, such as the Mohegan and Pequot, sided with the English against Metacom's coalition. These choices were driven by long-standing rivalries and strategic calculations. Similarly, English colonists were not united. Disputes over land, power, and policy led to internal strife. Quakers and others criticized the war and the treatment of native peoples, clashing with more militant neighbors. Acts of extreme violence marked the war on all sides. English raiders under men like Benjamin Church led brutal attacks on native villages. Native warriors, under the broader resistance led by Metacom, attacked settlements, sometimes targeting non-combatants. In the infamous Mystic Massacre, English and native allies burned a Pequot village, killing hundreds. In the Great Swamp Fight, colonial forces launched a surprise attack on a fortified Narragansett settlement, causing devastating casualties. In this chaos, the line between civilized and savage blurred. History often seeks heroes and villains, but in King Philip's War, those distinctions are elusive. Native fought native, settler fought settler, and alliances crossed all boundaries. Innocence itself became a complicated idea amidst widespread suffering. This chapter of history reminds us that the past is not black and white, but a dense tapestry woven from fear, ambition, and the struggle for survival. Over time, the brutal complexities of King Philip's War have cast a long shadow over the earlier story of cooperation and thanksgiving. Later, conflicts and suffering have sometimes been conflated with the earlier peaceful celebration, distorting our view of the original event. It is crucial to recognize that the Thanksgiving story, with its spirit of unity and shared bounty, stands separate and distinct from the later wars. The first Thanksgiving was a genuine moment of peace and friendship between two very different cultures, a brief interlude of harmony before the turmoil that followed. Blurring the Thanksgiving story with the devastation of King Philip's War obscures both truths. While the war reflects the tragic realities of colonial expansion and its impact on native peoples, the Thanksgiving feast remains a testament to the possibility of peace and mutual respect. Keeping these events distinct is essential for an accurate understanding of the past. The celebration of Thanksgiving today is a tapestry of traditions shaped by centuries of custom and reinterpretation. Several milestones helped form the holiday we recognize now. The first official Thanksgiving proclamation in Plymouth came in 1623, when Governor William Bradford declared a day of thanks to mark the end of a drought that had threatened the year's harvest. This was a religious observance centered on prayer and reflection, not the harvest feast of 1621. In 1789, President George Washington proclaimed the first nationwide Thanksgiving, setting November 26th as a day of public thanksgiving and prayer, expressing gratitude for the end of the Revolutionary War and the ratification of the U.S. Constitution. For decades, Thanksgiving observances varied from state to state. Sarah Josepha Hale, the editor and author best known for Mary Had a Little Lamb, campaigned for a national Thanksgiving holiday. After 17 years of persistent advocacy, her efforts succeeded when President Abraham Lincoln, in 1863, declared a national day of thanksgiving to our beneficent father, to be observed on the last Thursday in November, in the midst of the Civil War. Similar celebrations appear around the world. Canada, for instance, celebrates Thanksgiving on the second Monday in October, a tradition with roots tracing back to voyages such as Martin Frobisher's 1578 expedition in search of the Northwest Passage. Other places influenced by American culture, such as Liberia, founded by formerly enslaved people from the United States, and certain Pacific islands, have adopted their own Thanksgiving observances. In the United States, the date of Thanksgiving was not fixed until 1941, when Congress passed a law declaring the fourth Thursday in November the official National Day of Thanksgiving, partly in response to President Franklin D. Roosevelt's attempt to move the holiday earlier to lengthen the Christmas shopping season. As we draw the curtain on the story of Thanksgiving, we reflect on a holiday that has transcended time, geography, and culture. From the early days of Plymouth Colony to modern tables around the world, Thanksgiving remains a symbol, sometimes contested, sometimes cherished, of communal gratitude and shared humanity. The journey of Thanksgiving is a tapestry woven with history, tradition, and the universal human experience. It is a narrative that has evolved, adapting to the needs and understanding of each generation. Today, Thanksgiving invites us to gather, share in the earth's bounty, and remember the ties that bind us. It is a time to celebrate our commonalities, to bridge our differences, and to acknowledge the complexities of our shared history. The true spirit of Thanksgiving lies not in the opulence of the feast, but in the simplicity of gratitude. It is a moment to honor the past, appreciate the present, and nurture hope for the future. As we embrace the warmth of family and friends, we can carry the essence of Thanksgiving with us all year round. For in gratitude we find a common language that speaks across time and distance, connecting us all in a circle of shared humanity.